Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Just wanted to let you know the town manager would like to join the meeting too. He's on his way down. Oh, he just got there.
Hi, Laura.
How are you?
You're out of the picture. I'm out of the picture. Sure y'all can hear me.
Okay, I guess we're ready. Those remote, you can see all of us here for once. So since this is a special meeting with a relatively specific agenda, we have really only two items. One is to accept the minutes of the April 11th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes? Will second?
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Minutes are accepted. Straight on our two items. Correspondence, I didn't receive any specific correspondence. So at the May 11th town council meeting, there was a facilities report, which I thought was very interesting and educational. So I thought we should discuss it. It was emphasized at that point that it was a draft report and there was still time to have feedback. I assume both to the company and the town council. We have the town manager here. Would you like to start and make some comments? Or
Absolutely.
okay,
Happy to. So this will be, I'll look forward and then side to side just to make sure I'm making eye contact with everybody here. But good morning, everybody. Sorry it's taken me this long to actually attend one of your meetings. It's been on the to-do list for a while, so this will be a fun topic to kind of wade through here. That's correct. The April 11th meeting of the town council, an architecture and design firm, TSKP Studios, who the town retained. We've actually been working with TSKP for quite some time on the new elementary school project. They're our design firm for that. And so we went out to bid about, maybe 9 months ago or so at this point, for a municipal facilities needs assessment. As I think most everybody probably knows, we have some we'll call it vintage building stock in the town of Mansfield. Many buildings that we use were designed for other purposes and have kind of been retrofitted or made to work for their current purpose. Good example of that is the town hall itself. That was a grammar school, as everybody knows. It's not the way you would design a town hall today in terms of the layout for a variety of reasons if you were designing a new facility. And so you can kind of go on the list, either things that weren't designed for their current use, or even if they were designed for the current use, just the needs and the standards by which we conduct our business now has changed enormously in 50 years or 70 years more. And so this study is kind of phase one, is what I call it, phase one of what will be a couple different phases of looking at our facilities, evaluating needs. And when I say evaluating needs, it's a particular focus on the programmatic use. How well are these spaces allowing us to meet our current mission, provide current services, and how well will they allow us to continue to meet our mission as the mission evolves, as the services evolve over time. So current needs and projected future needs. How well are we doing? And to a lesser extent, looking at the actual physical condition of the building, but that's important. But I guess the point there being that, you can have a building that's in great, quote unquote, great physical condition. It's not leaching heat, the windows are good, the roof works, the floors look great, but it's way undersized for its current purpose, or the layout makes no sense, or any number of other issues. So it's not just about is the building in good shape, it's how well is it actually able to provide for the programmatic needs that we have. And so we looked at, or are looking at, most all town buildings. The only buildings that aren't specifically part of the study, although they are, everything at least indirectly is involved, but the only buildings that are specifically part of the focus of the study are the library and the community center. And the reason for that is those are actually about the only buildings the town owns that nobody really anticipates we could or would actually move away from. That doesn't mean we're not going to put money in those buildings. We absolutely are. We want to make sure that they continue to meet needs. But we're not closing the community center. We're not moving the community center into a new building. Same thing with the library. Those facilities are where they are, and they continue to serve the community with investments in them down the road. But we're not closing our library and building a new library downtown. We're happy with those facilities. Everything else, to an extent, is basically up for debate. The town hall, the senior center, our fire stations. Our DPW garage is a very old building. The site works well, but the building is, if anybody's been to DPW, we are not going to awe you with grandeur in our DPW facility. It's a pretty tired garage. And then our facility space, we lease space from UConn over at the Depot campus. It's sort of a handshake agreement. We could lose that space at any given time. And we're sort of, that's almost like the town's attic, I guess, the way I would describe our facilities. But there's just a lot of stuff in there. And if we ever got a call from UConn, which they could do literally any day and say, we need that space, we're going to demo the building, we're going to build something new there. Aside from whatever courtesy they might give us, 90 days notice, we have no alternative in place for our facility shop. And so that could leave us up the creek in a hurry if that were to happen. So all that to say, we're looking at all our needs, at sort of 30,000 foot level and starting to sort of focus on more of the granular operations needs of the buildings. And so as we've gone through this process, we've really got kickstarted in October and looking at the existing building stock and starting to think about potential alternatives, either the redesign or redevelopment of an existing building at its current site, or trying to figure out if there's a better site somewhere. One of the things that is very evident is the need for dramatically improved senior center space. This building, which in some ways is impressive in terms of some of the assets it has, is kind of a quirky building, right? It's been added on and kind of cobbled together over the years. The layout's kind of squirrely. There's persistent drainage problem. You're kind of in this soup bowl where all the water just kind of wants to come, and it's just very very steep challenges working within the blueprint, or the footprint, I should say, of this building to accomplish the long-term needs, the present needs and future needs. Now, that's not to say that the site itself, the location, doesn't have certain advantages. We've talked a lot about proximity to Juniper Hill. We've talked about proximity to the housing authority. So there are certain things that it's going for in terms of its adjacencies. You're not that far from the downtown. And so part of what we will be looking at, or are looking at, is the merits of the facility staying here, even if the building either is literally redone on the site, or at least taken all the way back to the stud, so to speak. But I think a concept that has emerged is a perhaps more attractive alternative to that, setting aside the budgetary realities of all that. This goes without saying, these are major projects with major expense. There was a lot of interest and thought that the community of residents that this facility serves would be well served by the senior center being co-located, part of the broader campus, if you will, of the town hall and the community center. seniors can easily walk to the community center for programs. They can come into the senior center. They can go over to town hall to transact business. But just again, 30,000 foot level thinking that if you could snap your fingers and make it happen, then the funding wasn't an obstacle, that boy, that might be a really good outcome. And so at this stage, we have not gotten too far along in our sort of planning. It's really high level conceptual at this point. And one of the slides that was presented at the council meeting on Monday, I think there are actually a couple variations of it that are being kicked around, but where might a senior center go on the town hall / community center parcel, and just essentially wanting to get a very preliminary read from the council about whether or not this was something that they would be interested in exploring further. We're nowhere near decision points like this is what's happening. It was just trying to figure out from the council's perspective, is that a non-starter? Is there interest there? I got the sense there is interest there. And so we now is sort of the time when we would be looking to pivot into getting more community input, community stakeholder input, if you will, about the various possibilities that exist. And so I guess I'll stop there just to underscore again that right now we're just exploring different ideas, trying to get a general sense from an order of magnitude standpoint of what the costs associated with some of this would be. But local officials and our architect, TSKP, we're very interested in getting feedback from you all on this potential alternative. And of course, there will be opportunities to set up time to talk directly with the architect as well, but I'll stop there. And that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you very much. What we would like to accomplish in this meeting is to discuss, to get our points out as a committee, to find a little bit as to whether we have a consensus or whether we're going to have our input as individual members. Let's see, one of the items that came up at the presentation, well, at the town council meeting was a matter of priorities. One of the councilmen did a great job of arguing for having the senior center a high priority item. Personally, I would have to agree with that. What are your feelings as a committee and how do you express priority? Anyone?
Well, we have been saying it's been a priority for the last 10 years. This space, we know is unviable. We just have to, I think, decide where we want to insert ourselves. We have the opportunity here to have input and figure out as a commission where we think we should insert ourselves.
So if I might, I guess, just again, to start with, I think is the most fundamental question. So not to get too hung up on, on this sort of schematic, where the space might be. They throw a couple, these aren't even like, it's not just two options. They looked at a couple, they have a rough idea of, if it's a sort of stacked building, what square footage might be needed. But I guess the question is, let's just start with the parcel and the location. So in terms of location, what's your sort of response, level of support, level of concern to a senior center somewhere on that parcel or parcels, since there's technically two there?
Okay, well, many years ago, when Charlie here, that was one of the spots that we designated that would be feasible to have a senior center. Eastwood and South Peopleville.
Eastwood, yeah, this was a little further back this way.
Yeah, well, we were thinking about back here, there's a big parcel.
Yeah.
There's a big parcel.
Yukon has a lot of woods there, yeah.
Yeah, and I figured that maybe Yukon might be not as nice enough to give it But yeah, we did discuss that as an alternative. They make a very good point. I mean, it's accessible to everybody. They can walk the downtown if they have to. They can walk to the town hall. They can go across the street to Price Chopper. It's a very desirable spot. Okay, so is this one. You're here, like you said, you got Juniper Hill up there, you got Glen Ridge over there, you got the housing already over here. This one, all the facilities are still here, the gas is here, electricity is here. Okay, all the fundamentals are here. Okay. Here again, what we have to have here would be a two-story building because of the room. I don't know if you want to go into that. I don't know. Some of that land over there that belongs to the housing authority. Kind of make a deal with them that we could take part of that over there and make a bigger parking lot, so on and so forth. So this has been kicked around for many years. Okay, but this year is, as far as I'm concerned, the beautiful spot because that's one of them that we said we would like. So yeah.
Might have also mentioned, since you specifically just mentioned parking, that again, what's on the paper here, this isn't the only option by any means, but I want to let folks know that part of what's very much on TSBP's radar is, if we brought additional facilities, and frankly, even if we just kept the town hall and the community center where they are on this parcel, either way, there are real parking needs in the downtown. And so any reconfiguration needs to provide a net increase, and probably a net substantial increase in existing parking. We know that there's, growing parking demand from UConn. We know there's always parking demand from E.O. Smith students. And so pressure on the use of this lot or lots is probably only going to increase.
That's one problem right there is there's the parking. That is the one problem with senior center. That's a big problem. We have a lot of handicap parking, and we turn out to get because the spaces are bigger and so on and so forth. So yes, that's a good place to put it, but there again, that's why when I proposed it, I proposed this land over here so that we could make that parking for the senior center. So that's my thought.
Other thoughts?
And it seems like logically it's a good place for it. Is there a downside to putting it there?
Traffic.
Other than, as Will mentioned, having enough space for handicap parking, which would be necessary.
It does have a bus shelter right outside the facility. Right outside the that's a plus for us, as far as that's concerned.
Good morning. Sorry.
Any of our virtual participants have thoughts or reactions to the idea of a senior center facility located there?
I'm just going to comment. I really liked the idea after watching. First off, the presentation was great. I like the idea of having it near this community center. It's hard for me to state where exactly it would be. I just don't have that expertise, but I like the comments of the synergy between the community center and the senior center. I think that they could help one another in many ways. I know so many seniors who are really not participants at the senior center, but are at the community center. They're younger seniors or more vibrant seniors, I guess. And I like the idea of having them close by, but that's, I'm not taking into consideration any kind of parking or issues like that. So that was just a thought I had.
I just, a couple things, and Ryan knows this, when I talk to the architects, I think the site is phenomenal for synergy, like you said. I think, That, and again, if they're looking at parking options, whether it's a parking garage or, you know, whatever. I do know the site has some issues with topography and ledge there, and I'm not sure if because I know just when we looked at building the playground, that was an issue. So there are some challenges with the site, but I think as far as co-locating it with other town services, I mean, many communities around the country, that's what they do. And there's a phenomenal amount of interaction between the different buildings and services. And, you know, there's some real advantages to having everything campus style. I do think traffic can be an issue down there, probably will continue to be more of an issue. But I do think if it's, you know, just like the community center, if the services and programs are what people want, they are going to find a way. It's on a bus route, you know, it's, you know, got great access to utilities. So development's a little easier in that area. So, you know, I think it would be a great location. But I do honestly feel too that if you build the right thing and it's accessible and it's what people want and desire and the programs are good, they're going to come almost wherever you build something. So I think the town has a number of options, but like I said, I do like that site.
I like that site also. I remember someone coming here saying that, a senior saying they wanted to attend night meetings like the planning and zoning, the town council, but it was difficult getting around at night. And so if it's more central, that would be easier for seniors to go to some of the meetings at night. And I thought I heard you say on the town council that this building was too costly to renovate.
Well, I mean, I think when we say too costly to renovate, the idea, again, in broad strokes, that it's TSKP's opinion that while we haven't abandoned looking at it, that at the end of the day, making this building what you want it to be, you're actually gonna probably be more cost, like you'll spend less money just to build a new, even though it kind of runs contrary to, oh, Yankee thrift, like, you know, we'll just sort of renovate what we have, but there's so much, you'd have to dismantle this so much that by the time you make this fit what you need, you would have probably dollar for dollar, you know, more cost effective and perhaps just less cost entirely, just to move it down the road and start.
This one would have to be just devastated, just
Well,
knock
one-
right down and just build all new.
In past studies that they've done, just to fix just the HVAC system alone, keeping the building exactly as it is over $1 million. And you can't fix the drainage issue because of the way they built it. You can't fix some other issues that are in the building. The only real option, if you were going to do it, would be to completely tear it down and locate the building on a different part of this parcel, and do a multi-floored building. You're still going to have issues with parking and other things because, you know, the site is not going to get any bigger. But the building itself, you know, meets it's not the building. There are some hokey things with circulation and all of that, but it just is not a good location on that lot. And there were mistakes made in building the building as well. That can't really be undone easily.
Who's next? Did you get your say?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might have also, probably should have also mentioned, just kind of focused my remarks on the senior center specifically. But I should also say, although I think you guys are already aware of this, but another thing that TSKP has looked at is potential alternative uses for the soon-to-be surplus school properties, the two, Vinton and Goodwin, that'll be decommissioned hopefully sooner than later, although I think folks probably know our construction timeline for the new consolidated elementary school is behind schedule. So for a period of months, hopefully not much more than a couple months, we're anticipating that schools, the two remaining schools, will be in operation next fall, but the point still being at some point in the not too distant future, those buildings will be decommissioned as schools, and so the town has decisions to make about what we're doing with those properties. And so again, lots of alternatives still to be explored, but at a high level, TSKP is of the mindset that The Vinton property, because of its location, it's kind of, I should say, the most out in the country, kind of physically removed from downtown, water sewer infrastructure, all that. That, you know, while you could always find a town use of the property, that probably makes more sense to part with that property and look at converting it into, you know, whether it's multifamily or single family homes. I think the neighborhood, single family kind of fits the motif a little better. But look to part with that property, have it redesigned as residential. And then when it comes to Goodwin, I know TSKP, part of the presentation, shared, you know, a sort of quick and dirty example of how that building could be, you know, retrofitted on the inside for 1 and or 2 bedroom housing units. Doesn't have to be senior housing, but we know that there's a demand for more senior housing. So before we, I guess, talk about, well, if a private developer buys it, they redevelop it in something, and it's not for seniors, we thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to have a conversation with our community about senior housing needs, and would that be the highest and best use of that school. So I guess I'm happy to get some feedback from the group on that front.
So it was saying that a possible use for Goodwin was early childhood development and a senior center, and possibly 21 bedroom apartments. That is also a viable alternative, because I recently spoke with someone who was really concerned about where she is going to live at the age of 92. Because she seems to be, it seems as if she's being priced out of where she is. So as seniors, I know our concentration is senior center. And it said we could possibly put a senior center over there. I don't know that for a senior center, that seems a little bit too far out, I think, for a senior center. But I certainly endorse it for 21 bedroom senior
Senior
apartments.
housing.
We need senior housing in this town.
Senior housing, it's gonna be a lot of senior housing. I know, you know, people, you know, they're when people retire, the thing that really happens is that the guy, instead of taking the guy with the spouse or whoever, got the pension or whatever, they don't take right to survivorship on their pension. So what happens is they die first, okay? The wife, the other spouse gets nothing, none of his pension, whereas she would have got half of his pension. So now she's sitting here with just social security. She's looking around, the only place she can go is Wellington, Ashland, Coventry. She can't stay in Nancy. Okay, we're all her friends now, we're a family, it's everything else. Why? Because there's no senior housing in this town. That's my saying.
I think you make a good point. I think the Willington and Ashford models, where there's housing right alongside a center, is another
Yes.
great model. And it would be worth taking a look at both of those and how they work. If that could happen on that site, I could see that site being a real neat option. And transportation is something we could solve. You know, if we know that that's one of the challenges with that site, then we can work around that and we can build our program to better support that. But I like the idea of housing at a center in the same area, especially with young kids too. So I think either site, both of those, either located near the town hall or the community center or over at Goodwin. I think there's just a lot of opportunity in both. And once we get the go ahead, it's like, we're ready, you know, and we'll make it work. This is exciting. We have been talking about this for a long time. This is exciting for me. The most I can speak to is growth, right? So I've been here, it's gonna be 8 years in May, believe it or not. Our program has grown exponentially in that time. We cannot grow anymore. We can't do any bigger lunches. We've hit it. We're at max. So once we have some space to grow into, I know we're gonna be able to kind of take that next jump. So I think this is very exciting and whatever we need to kind of get you what you need throughout this process, you know, you
Well, I
let us
definitely
know.
think, and, you know, if, whether it's the Commission on Aging or the Commission on Aging and, you know, sort of the end users, you will, the senior center, but I think the council would probably benefit as it decides, makes decisions on, funding the next phase, quote unquote, of this work, which is the sort of schematic design work. That's where you kind of really start to zero in on, okay, what are we designing, where are we designing it, and how much is all that going to cost from a construction standpoint. Certainly, it's helpful for the council to hear viewpoints from the senior community that this is a priority. And I mean, I think they fully anticipate that, so it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise, but just for affirmation that, yes, please do, make this part of your plans, because there will be some daunting price tags, there's no question. And you need to, get over that mountain and convince the community that, this is something worth investing in. And if there's any question in people's mind about how bad it's needed, then it might not get funded.
Yeah, Pat.
I think that, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I've already talked, so.
Well, I think that the senior center should be a priority, given the condition of this building and the expense to renovate it. But along with that, I have to speak to what Will said about seniors being priced out of the market. Both of us live in a community 55 and above, approximately 220 households, and a good percentage of those are not the brand new double wides that the new owners are putting in. The rest of us are at risk of being priced out of the current housing that we have. We've had rent increases for the lots of $5, $6, $7, $8 a month over the past, well, I've been there 15 years, several years. At this point, the rental increases for the lots are jumping by tens and $20 and $25 and $30 a month, plus which the current ownership's niche market is upscale, which means it gets more and more restrictive for what we can do to our homes, what we can't do to our homes. And the emphasis is on putting in brand new homes wherever possible. So as Will said, we could be looking at 100 households being priced out of Mansfield with nowhere else to go.
Which housing community?
Rolling Hills.
You could see on Mansfield Connection, people, a single mom, she can't afford a rent to move back. I mean, we are not paying attention to what we're doing for seniors in this country. We just concentrate on Yukon. And perfect example, this weekend I had 200 kids in my, around the corner from my house in a rented beautiful home. And somebody next door just paid $500,000 for a house, and you got 200 kids having a party. How are we controlling this?
Well, it is a tough problem to navigate or to manage. A lot of it, unfortunately is a bit, I want to say beyond our control, but we don't have direct control over as a town. So when developers approach their planning and development office and say, hey, we're interested in multifamily housing, we're looking at this property or that property, what are your thoughts? I can say that, our planning and development directors, staff are always encouraging people to, would-be developers, to look at age-restricted housing for seniors. In part because, as folks here probably know, Yukon, has fought pretty fiercely to keep student housing on campus. They want to collect that revenue. So to the extent they're paying attention to what's going on, and they are, they really don't want to see student housing off campus. They view that as that's revenue that they're hemorrhaging. So there is a shared interest in this one respect that we know there's a need for senior housing. We always actively encourage developers to build it, in part because we know we need it, in part we know that UConn's not going to object to it. But by the same token, this is what I'm saying, we don't have direct control. I mean, a developer, let's face it, they're in for the project, right? So they do their pro forma, they look at what their net is going to be, the return on investment for a project that while they won't say it's student housing, by virtue of how they're designing it and some of the features, like this is gonna be very appealing to students and probably primarily students. Even though it's not like age restricted, like for students, it's not like an under 25 community or something like that, that's illegal. But the point is, they look at it and they make their own economic determination. It's not that there isn't profit to be had in age restricted housing, it's that it pales in comparison to what they would get, what they command top dollar from the parents of students and what. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's a hopeless endeavor, but I just want to make sure that the town staff, I mean, we, at every turn, we're trying to encourage developers to kind of talk up the fact that, well, UConn's been very challenging. This route, you might actually find it, you wouldn't have to deal with all that headache. And sometimes we encouraging people, okay, yeah, well, we didn't come into this thinking about senior housing, but we'll give that a look. And then invariably by the time the next thing, just the numbers don't make sense for them. We really want to do this. And so there's not a regulatory club, I guess, that we can even say, you can't do that. Well, they can say, well, we'll just go to another town. We'll go someplace else. We'll go to Coventry, Tom, and build the project we want to build there. So I definitely hear you. I think it's a shared concern. And again, it's sort of unlikely for a scenario here where oftentimes we might be at odds with UConn. We definitely, town and UConn would both love to see more senior housing. For one, they still have people that work there, 55 and over, that, employees, staff that they want housing. Theoretically, they're downsizing, transitioning to a stage of their life pre-retirement. So again, I would say it's hopeless, but it is a challenge.
What control does our town have with UConn? What kind of report? Because I heard at one of the council meetings, how do we work with UConn? Where did we lose that?
So I think the relationship, I think it's a lot better today than it was even 9 months ago. Last summer was kind of a low point. That was when UConn, which had objected to one of the two large-scale multifamily housing developments in the Four Corners. Things were tied up in litigation, on the grounds of impacts to wetlands, et cetera. And then UConn, kind of unbeknownst to anybody, was in negotiations with the developer, and they basically bought up the one parcel next to CVS, and so it killed that project because they bought the land. And so, we obviously, for a whole host of reasons I would get into a rehash, took great exception to that. I know UConn's official position was and continues to be, well, we didn't buy that to stop a housing project. We bought that land because it's contiguous with everything else they have going on with the technology park, and they have ideas of future options. And okay, so whether I personally think that that's real or not doesn't really matter. UConn bought the property. What we did do, of course, was step up in a big way to make sure the public was paying attention, make sure the governor was paying attention, make sure all the stakeholders were paying attention, so that it didn't happen with the other project just down the road. So we salvaged one of the two. But it's tough because there really isn't. I mean, again, we hold very little control. UConn doesn't have to get our approval for anything. It's state agency. It's almost like, I'm certainly not an expert in tribal law, but you can almost say it's, in some ways, it's kind of analogous to, the sovereign of like an Indian nation that's like self-governing. It's like we run our own show and we really don't have to get approval to do anything, even though we're in your town. But the relationship has gotten better, obviously the change in leadership, albeit under an interim president. We're meeting regularly, some issues we agree on more so than others. But I definitely think it's come a long way in 9 months. I think over time, certainly my understanding of the history is the relationship has had peaks and valleys. And so we're sort of on the upswing, I think, after a big crater that was this summer, we thought they just torched the relationship entirely. So I guess that's kind of the state of play with the country.
A minute ago, you mentioned numbers. While we have you handy, I spent an entire morning at the town hall the other day with 2 departments, and they all said, go see the town manager. Is there a way to figure out, and I suppose it would be based on census data, is there a way to figure the percentage of tax-paying residents who are 55 and older in Mansfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a project that would require a little bit of work to tease out, but I think, I'm not saying we get it down to like household level accuracy, but I think we can come up with some plus or minus handful of percent approximation. Over 50, 55 and over taxpayers. If that's information was interested in.
Be very much interested in knowing that. Because that would give us a little more ammunition for deciding priorities.
Ryan, I got, you said that the town has no control over what these people do when they buy property and want to house them. Well, we have a unique opportunity now because we have town property available that we can put in restricted housing. And we decide what goes in there, not somebody else.
Yeah, so if you're talking about, say, Goodwin as an example,
Right.
yeah, that can be sort of attached to the deed, and you're limiting its redevelopment we use specifically for that. So yes, for land that the town owns, that would be transferred, we can put stipulations in place that would guarantee that.
Right, okay, good.
So,
Just one more thing, going back to Goodwin, and the 20 units for senior housing. We're hearing from Sunrise that I think that might not be enough if that many people are being priced out. Also at Glenridge, because it's some of the units up there are older, they're doing things like putting in new windows and trying to upgrade it. And it's going to cost more for the residents living there. And some people at Glenridge are worried about being priced out.
Mhm.
So it's, there's a need for a new senior center, and there certainly is a need for the town somehow to have more senior housing. Rights Way was senior housing, and now that has changed a bit. So we're in a
Juniper
quandary
has
here.
about a year and a half wait.
Yes.
So Glenridge, Juniper, Rolling Hills, Wright's Way. That's
Senior
about-
home is
those are
going
the
down the drain.
options.
Yeah.
It's going down.
Is there any talk about what would happen here? Could this be a site for housing? down the
Yeah,
road
so
if
actually,
we-
yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because this is speculative, we haven't engaged in conversations with the housing authority, but I think there might have been some reference either on a slide or just in passing, but yeah, thinking about, given, just like we're talking about, one of the reasons why it might be good to have a senior center here, because of the adjacencies, if we move this facility, built a new one down the road, and this became available, the thought is, we have, tie-in that another entity would be the town, another entity would be interested in picking this up for housing.
That could be great.
Excellent idea.
And I think we're calling it.
Yeah, I would also say it's contiguous to Juniper Hill. And I can say because of the way that Juniper Hill is the HUD model, that's probably more the type of housing that people are looking for than the state-owned housing that's over on Wright's Way, because that's affordable housing, whereas Juniper Hill is set more like Section 8. So you can actually not make enough money to live over at Wright's Way, just so you know. So I would hope that whatever they built, they would try to get it somehow in that more Section 8 or HUD model. And I'm not sure that the Housing Authority is looking toward that from past conversations, just so you know. I mean, I would say more people are much more interested in Juniper Hill than they are in Wright's Way. That's why they have the waiting list that they have. And I'm not sure, they're a nonprofit that owns and runs that. So that might be something for the town to look into too. Is there a way for Juniper Hill to expand down onto this property versus the Housing Authority?
One of the suggestions in terms of locating the senior center in the town hall parcel was it could possibly be part of the town hall, top floor, bottom floor, who knows, as opposed to a separate building entity. I was on the board at Pierce Home, which is a retirement community, and I was very impressed with the advantage of getting an architect who specializes in that type of activity. So I guess one of my concerns, if you had it with the town hall, could you have an architect deal with the floors that were designated senior center, or is that just not feasible?
So I think, depending on who, I think in a lot of ways, it's likely that our existing architecture firm will be in place for the next phase of all this, but I should be clear that, you know, we do competitive bidding, right? And so it's not a guarantee that TSKP Studios, who are working with on the needs assessment, would be the firm that we will work with on the schematic design work the next phase. But if we assume for a second that they are, because certainly we've established a good history with them on this. So, you know, if the finances were at all close, I think it's really likely we would be working with them. But I know their mentality would be that, you know, if it's an area of expertise they don't feel like they have within their existing team of architects and design folks, they would absolutely collaborate with a subcontractor, a designer, if you will, that specific expertise, and work with on the design of that. Which we've seen them do that already. And I should also point out, yeah, so there really are three options for that parcel, right? There's a detached, even though it's depicted here, it could go any number of places on the parcel. A detached option, as you said, an option that's incorporated with the town hall, whether it's a whole floor or a wing or something with the town hall. The leading idea is that building is a stacked building, probably at least 3 stories, and it moves towards 195, so it becomes kind of part of the streetscape with everything else on 195. And the third option would be attached to the community center, the new wing of the community center. So there would be ability to get from the community center without having to walk outside into another entrance, you know, into the community center from the senior center. So those are kind of the 3 options.
Would be a direct entrance to the senior center if it was attached?
Either way, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, even if it's, you know, sort of shared mechanicals and there's integration between the 2 buildings, you will have people that want to just use the senior center facilities and so want a dedicated access so that they don't plan on venturing into the community center. So even if it was its own, even if it was attached, it wouldn't be using the community center entrance and kind of then having to navigate into a senior center. Definitely. I mean, we would have it set up in a way you could from the community center get in there if you want to kind of go back and forth. There would definitely be some separate. Maybe even the other side of the building, the back side.
As long as we don't do what we did in town. Parking is behind your medical center. And people can't walk. I mean, it wasn't really thought out.
You're talking about the urgent care?
Yeah, I mean, people can't walk from a garage down and there's no entrance
Right.
from the garage. I mean, hello. I think we should get some. I was in the industry, so I'm very critical, so I'll be the first to admit, but that makes no sense to me at all. I mean,
It's one of those hindsight's 2020 things.
yeah, if you got a broken leg and you gotta walk from a garage, give me a break, there's no parking. I mean, I don't know who thought this out, but obviously they didn't. So
And I
hopefully
think-
we're not gonna do that.
I think you're touching on a good point. I think it's important for us to be involved in these conversations as we go down the road. We have enjoyed a fair amount of autonomy here, right, Pat? Meaning, we can shut our parking lot down and do a drive-through when we want to, because it's our building. Those are some things we'll want to think about going forward. On Friday, we had a full-on dance party in this room with 50 people at 1 p.m. We don't want that to disturb people who are working, but we still want to be able to do what we're doing. If that were an evening event, would there be meetings and things? So those are all parts of the conversation we should have. I don't want to compete for parking at different times during the day. I think it's got to be easy for seniors to get in and out. So those are just the pieces we'll want to be part of, you know, the conversation as they arise.
But critical people should be involved, what the needs are and what's gonna work and what's not. And not just
I know
That's
Pat and Kathy Ann's favorite day is tap dancing day on Mondays, right, Pat? And it's awesome, but it's literally a loop of the same music. And people tap dancing next to their office. So those are just practical considerations, but what I'm talking about.
Okay, Pat?
I do want to say the current firm that the town is working with has, in fact, they built the first Groton Senior Center. And so they do have, and when they came through, they asked me where I would recommend they go see. So I did give them a couple of, including going back, they didn't do the second Groton and haven't been back since, but I encouraged them to go see the current Groton Center and several others that we have looked at that we liked. So I agree with Ryan. I think that they've been in the field and are good enough if they're doing this to understand that each community is different and what they want might be different. I mean, I think probably the closest we've seen is our favorite one up in Massachusetts, but so I did give them that name. But there are plenty of places out there. I don't know that you necessarily have to have an architect that specifically design centers. You just have to have an architect that listens to the community and is willing to look at what else is out there. And, you know, and I would hope whatever firm was hired to do the next phase of the study, you know, would be willing to do that and understands how to run community workshops, because I do think those work. You know, getting the community input and then figuring out how you sift that all out, because you often get much, much more than you ever need. And then you also get people who think they know what's best for seniors without asking seniors or without asking the different groups that might utilize the space. So, and that includes staff. I mean, I'm being honest, you know, but it also includes a lot of people who feel they know what seniors need or want. So.
I think there's two sides to that, that if you have somebody who really is experienced in doing senior centers, it's very possible that they'll come up with some things you didn't think about. Oh, they have this particular problem in this facility, and here's the way we addressed it. It worked great.
Yeah, I will say I fortunately, you know, as you all know, have not only designed a center, but I go see centers all the time and evaluate them. So yeah, I've seen the problems with storage, parking, sound and lighting are probably the big, like tap dancing, as Sarah says, there's ways when you build to do some better things with sound, you know, sound and lighting is often a big problem as well. So yeah, but I do think you're right. I think a good architect will listen to that stuff, though. That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of the firms that would be interested will have had experience. You know, that doesn't always mean it's good experience either. If you ask some of the people where they built, whether their experience was positive, it won't necessarily be yes. So you're right. I think the answer is to really get out there and talk to other people who are in centers, see centers, and, you know, but also talk to the community.
Has anybody been down to the Groton facility? It has been very successful. I really think we should go see different and why they work.
Yeah, we are the only facility, there's a kind of a list of facilities we want to go check out. The only facility that we did a field trip to at this point, thus far, I should say, was another DPW facility to kind of gauge how their new facility compares to what we might be trying to go to. But as Pat said, you know, I know that folks at TSKP have referenced the list that was provided, and arrangements are going to be made to go. Well, unless you have another pressing need for me, I do have another meeting I need to transition to. I really do appreciate the feedback,
Thank you very much.
and it sounds like, you know, big picture, you guys are very supportive of these ideas that Pat has.
Just one last question. You mentioned possible architects working with the housing for senior housing. Are there any in the package that you might be considering who do have any expertise with seniors, in senior housing buildings.
So like when you're talking about the reuse of Goodwin, is that like you're talking about in that respect? Is that the,
Or you said you were speaking in the area of designing senior housing.
right, so I guess what I was, we had TSKP look at the possible reuse or redevelopment of the Goodwin building for housing, not because they would be the firm or any town hired architect would be the firm to do a sort of a final design and make that happen. It's more looking at like the proof of concept. So if there was a private interest that would want to buy the property from the town, you know, we obviously want to make sure, does this building lend itself to that? And then to Will's point, if we sold it, we could put stipulations in place of how the property was to be used. But at this time, I guess anything's possible. One option certainly would be that the town would invest in redesigning a building, making it senior housing or ready for senior housing, and then selling it. But I think more likely we would look to sell the property to a developer with restrictions in place that they have to redevelop it as senior housing, and then they design that. That's, and again, there's a few different models we could follow, but that's probably in this case the more likely scenario.
I guess my question was, in the package of architects that might be considered for such a project,
Yeah.
are there any you know of who have any expertise with designing for senior living?
So I don't know,
Just Google that.
yeah, I mean, so when we did the solicitation, I'll call it, for this phase of the work, TSKP was one of a handful of firms that bid on it. All the firms that bid on it were firms that have done a lot of municipal building projects. That was the focus of the study, right? Whether or not any of those firms, including TSKP, has been directly involved in housing projects, I don't know.
I'm sure as a designing firm, they can get expertise.
Yeah, I mean, they would know where to go to find it, whether or not they have it in house yet. Well, thanks again, all.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate having the audience.
We're doing barbecue chicken at the end of the month. I'll send you an invite. It's like your Memorial Day.
Never say no to barbecue. So,
Take care.
He's taking on a big task with this town.
So John, what do you think we should do now? You think we should go home?
I think we should do
Think-
more.
Think
We should
think about this
investigate
and,
in
At our
architects
next meeting,
That's specialized.
come up with some way. to
Okay,
express our
just-
concerns.
Excuse me, Will is speaking, hold on,
Okay.
can you repeat what you were saying?
Yeah, well, I guess my suggestion at this time would be to go home, go through all this stuff, and at our next meeting next week, you know, come up with a way to let the council know exactly what we want. I would suggest a letter. Okay, unless somebody wants to go to the town council meeting, you have to talk about it. But I would suggest a letter signed by all the members of the COA. I would personally sign that with you. It's not just, you know, a letter to select them all. You know, with the whole committee. That's what I would suggest.
I'm sorry to have brought up the town with the center, but that is so ridiculous. Not having access from a garage to your doctor.
Okay.
that whole concept is ridiculous.
It is, I don't know who was in charge of it, but
I mean, why does the New England primarily rural town need a downtown? I mean, we're not Manhattan, or, you know.
Okay, I gathered that
Oh, wow.
the general feeling was that the town hall parcel would at least be adequate. It would be ahead with the senior center in the town hall parcel as opposed to other options.
Yeah, I still want to see, I would like to see, like Sarah said, with Wellington and the rest of them, I would like to see the senior center involved with senior housing.
That's right,
Yes,
I would
because that's
definitely
what
want
you
to see
said.
it.
yes.
Okay? That I think should be priority number one. Priority number two would be the town hall, yes.
So Goodwin, you're saying Goodwin.
Or Benton. Of course,
Or
Benton, Benton's a lot better, but, it's a lot bigger, we could get more units in there.
But they're looking at Benton for that, I think, single,
DPW.
no, one of the things. that
I think they're looking at affordable housing units, development in that area.
But they would sell. the
Single
Right.
family,
Housing.
Oh.
single family affordable housing is what I'm hearing anyway.
At
What
Annie
they're
Benton,
looking at,
So I guess.
and at the Vinton area, yeah.
that's where
I
I
think the
live,
challenge with both of the school areas, quite frankly, is the bus line doesn't run to either.
right,
Transportation, they're really out of the way. Signage would be a problem, getting people to. But again, I've seen centers in all different kinds of spots. It all has to do with how you do it. I'm not sure that tying it to housing has to happen. I mean, I think there'd be an incredible synergy if it was in that area, but down near the community center, but they'd have to deal with the parking, the transportation, and the access. I've seen places do it great. I've seen it where there is the senior center might be a floor, but there's a separate door on one side with parking associated just for the center, that you just go in and out of the center from that door. And then there's another door for like the town hall or the library or whatever else is in that building. So there are ways to do it. I mean, there's some incredible places around. They would just really have to invest in really good design and a nice building. So, I mean, that space, I'll be honest with you, if they could deal with the parking issues, is a great site. It's just, I'm not exactly sure, especially with the ledge in the area. The cost to blast and the ledge in that area. I don't know how many of you remember when the community center was putting up and all the blasting, but it's a tough site from a topography point of view. So, but if they're saying you can do it,
That's what they make dynamite for.
Good when you get that turnout.
But yeah, I mean, think about it as priority number one, and priority number two.
yeah.
Thinking that maybe tell them that we want to put them in school and blah, 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 but we'll sell it for this. You might say, well, we'll give it, sell for this, well, we'll give it to you, you know? There's different ways to manipulate this, I think we should go for the moon and, and we'll settle for what,
Right. And keep in mind, whatever you do has to pass referendum. And so you need partners beyond just the seniors in order for it to pass. So that's another, I mean, again, having gone through this with projects in the past, you can have the best design, maybe even the best design for seniors, but if you can't get the community behind it, then it becomes a challenge. So, again, I guess I'm saying find the best partners when you're trying to pull a project together, because that, will really make or break the project. For example, in Glastonbury, a standalone senior center was never going to pass. It just wasn't. It became too politically charged and us against them. So until they went with their current motto, which is a senior center with community usage, and called it a community center, they couldn't get the votes. Plain and simple. So, you have to think about that too. What will get the voters out to vote, and how you might, and that's part of that thinking as well. So, I'm just going to say that sometimes it's great and you can link projects because, like if you're, for example, if you're linking a senior center with a public safety project, they don't even have to be on the same plot of land, but if they go up to vote at the same time, they both have a better chance of passing, because you get both groups to come out.
So let's build let's build a community center with a senior wing attached. And call it a community center.
There you go. I mean,
Right. Well, that's what they did in Glastonbury. It's basically a senior center with community usage, but it's called a community center and the senior center is at the community center. See what I'm saying? That's how they did it. But it's really, there's no space in there that was specifically designed for any other age group. It's pretty much, it's just made flexible enough so other groups can use the space when it's not in use for seniors. So,
From a programmatic standpoint, what's your feeling in terms of being incorporated into a town hall or being a standalone or attached building which is identified as senior center?
right, it actually depends on how it's built. So if it's built like I was telling you, where you have a separate entrance, some separate parking area, you know, you have the synergy from the other space, which is fantastic. I'll be honest with you, then people can do other things. I mean, as it is, you might have people who want to go to a particular exercise class over at the community center and can't make it back for lunch. But if you are right there, they can go back and forth between the different spaces. So it's really more about whether you have the right access, the right signage, you know what I mean? The right marketing, and the right activities happening where you are at. I mean, people will come, and sometimes they'll come beyond barriers if what you're offering is really appealing. So, I mean, you know, there are some advantages to being in this where we are now, because of it's what you would call a naturally occurring retirement area. We have so many different housing developments, projects, and people that live right in that area is great, and you're right on it. But the land itself, you know, unless we could go across the street or somewhere, that land itself just doesn't lend itself to a building that is going to meet the long-term needs, you know. So I think at either of the schools, although Vinton is really out of the way, you know, it's almost in Willimantic. And doesn't have transportation access, but it is a nice piece of land, I'll be honest with you. You know, Goodwin is, you know, and they're looking for more neighborhoods. So that would be a great place to have senior housing, because they're really looking to have more of a you know, and keep the neighborhood feel down there, because so much of that area has become student housing. So they're looking for something to pull the community together down that area. They could also do something down there, which would be really nice if it was some housing and then some community space. And then you'd have satellite places to run specific programs if you need, which isn't a bad idea either. You know, have worked in places and seen places where, you know, there are satellite senior programs, just like there's satellite libraries or whatever. So I think having a little bit of community space down there wouldn't be bad, along with the housing, if that happened. So there's lots of options. You know, the good thing is the town really didn't have options before. It didn't have land. It didn't, you know what I mean? It didn't have any freedom to do any of this for the longest time. And now with the changes with the pilot formula, you know, and the availability of the 2 school properties, there's the town has some options now. It even has space to move people while they renovate a building. That's what Groton did. They moved Sarah, for 1.5 years, right, out of their site to revamp their site into an old school that, you know, that had been vacated. So now you have that option that the town never had before. Now that you have those 2 buildings.
Okay, and give us just a little more before we adjourn for the week. From a programmatic standpoint, do you see any particular advantages of being part of the town hall, not being part of the town hall?
At this stage in the conversation, no. I mean, I think my point before was we should be conscious of being able to do the things that we are accustomed to doing, like having, you know, a performer who is loud in the middle of the day and not have that affect working offices. That would be my only concern with the whole town hall parcel being within the town hall. Other than that, I think we can work with everything, you know, again, so I'm just excited this is getting on the list.
How about the drive-through function? Can you see that working at the municipal?
You know, again, it's funny, Pat was asking me for some reflection prior to my annual review. And I said, one of the things about these past 2 years is that we have not been able to do any long-term planning. Because it didn't work, we couldn't, because every month it was different, and there was some new standard or rule or concern or something that we had to work around. I think the silver lining for my team on that is that we got more comfortable about not having an exact plan and then knowing that we would make it work. So in terms of drive-throughs, yeah, that might continue because we're seeing it's coming down about half and half people who prefer coming in versus picking it up as takeout. But no matter where we end up, we'll figure it out. You know, that's kind of my perspective at this point. We will figure it out.
And it may be a completely different issue that people have, you know, when the building comes up that you have to figure out, because, you know, that you're right, Sarah, it could be that, you know, I would never have thought we needed to have a way to do drive-through with design, would you? Neither did most other centers. They've had to back into, or I'll be honest with you, in some areas of the country, they do a lot of outdoor programming, but in a lot of areas they don't because of the extreme temperatures, one direction or the other. Everybody now is looking at how they can do more stuff outdoors. You know, I mean, it's kind of gone around, you know, I went to a lot of places where they built beautiful patios and horseshoe pits and bocce courts, you know what I mean? And nobody ever went out and used them. And now those areas are some of the most used because people feel most comfortable now outdoors after the pandemic. So I think you just need a space and a place that's flexible enough that as things change, you can move and change with them, you know, and that's probably the most important thing with the design. You've got to have the space be as flexible as it possibly can so that, you know, a computer room can become you know what I mean? Whatever the next phase is. Who would have ever thought everybody's computer labs are now closed down? If you see most centers have repurposed those, and those were highly popular when a lot of these centers were built. So, you know, it's just, you know, making the space as flexible as possible so that you can respond to the needs of the community. So.
Well, we're really grateful for this facility and the ability to do a hybrid meeting, but I would think going forward, it could be even better.
Mhm.
I would
Absolutely.
anticipate we would have classroom style rooms that would all be wired for this, that would make this
Right.
as easy as, because that is not gonna go away, having hybrid programs. It's so great,
No.
to have larger connection, and accessibility for people who can't make it for whatever.
Or like a snowbird that, you know, wants to continue with whatever group they're doing, but they're somewhere else for a few months of the year. You know, I mean, that's been really great for some people to be able to stay connected even when they have to travel or be somewhere else. So I think hybrid's here to stay. I agree with you, Sarah.
And as the years go on, there could be more and more seniors, say Juniper Hill, whatever, who
Mhm.
can't get out at all. And that would be their only connection to the world, would be to be able to take part in their activities as they could.
That's right.
And wouldn't it be great to have a building that you weren't backing into all of the technology? Because that's what happens all over town now. Most of the buildings are not set up or wired correctly, and there's not even the space. Like we looked at getting a generator, for example. We don't have, you know, if the utilities go out, we're completely out at the center. To try to back in, and I don't know where you'd even put a generator anyway at the building, but the cost to try to do it there is, you know, at the senior center is astronomical, and we'd lose space, which we can't lose space. So there's so many things that, you know, would be better if we were located somewhere else. Built in a place that, you know, that could be upgraded and meet the needs.
Okay, so trying to really cut off discussion, we'll say we'll see you next Monday.
Monday, can't wait, I like it.
I like that.
I think you have to move to adjourn.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
thank
okay,
you.
so moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye, everybody, have a
See you
good night.
next week.
Joanne, is that you still? Joanne?
Yeah,
Okay, then
I probably